What's up, everyone? Nan Man here, and we're back with another episode of Nan Man's Nerd Corner. This time we're going to be going into our Magic the Gathering discussion, mainly focused on the Pro Tour, because the Pro Tour just concluded. We got to go through it. It was, of course, the Lord of the Rings set, so there was the return of Modern for the Pro Tour for the first time in 4 years. So we're going to kind of dive into it and, really get in, break down a little bit about what's going on in Modern right now and how the meta is shaping up and kind of go into things here. This is going to be a solo episode for it. We are in the works of getting another one of our episodes out with, of course, my co-host Jaime, where we're going to be doing kind of an update of what's been going on in the scene related to the Spider-Man stuff, because there is, of course, a writer strike and actor strike going on, as well as what's going on with the season for Diablo. So very, very cool stuff. Update episode coming out. And then we're going to also be doing an anime episode coming up soon. We're trying to correspond that, there's a lot of big anime news related, especially with One Piece stuff going on, Gear 5. If you're familiar with anime, that's kind of a big part of the scene, as well as the live action stuff that keeps a lot of the anime scene, especially the YouTubers, talking. So, we'll get into a whole episode of that. But let's get into it. Let's talk about Modern for a bit, guys. So Pro Tour happened, return of Modern for the first time in 4 years. Very, very happy to see it. I was following the decks, seeing what happened, and then I was able to catch the finals, and was really, really impressed with both players' play. Of course, it was Jake Beardsley versus Christian Calcutta. For those that are familiar, Calcutta's been kind of a grinder, been on the scene for quite a long time. So it was cool to see him back up there in the top. Still, I don't believe he's won yet a Pro Tour, but has made it in the top 8 quite a bit. So it was very cool to see him back. And then, of course, Jake Beardsley, this was his first time, and making it to the finals was huge. Now, the biggest thing with this is, we've been seeing tournament stuff. We've been seeing some stuff on Magic Online related to the Lord of the Rings cards and how they're shaping things up and changing and adjusting the format. The biggest thing is the One Ring, Orcish Bowmasters, and the, what was that, Lorien it's the blue card. What is that? Hold on. I'm gonna, so I don't have to stumble over it. It is called Lorien Revealed, or some variation of pronunciation. It's a island cycling, or you could pay 5 and draw 3 cards. Really good. So every one of those cards that I mentioned were featured in a top 8 deck list. So of course, our decks that we saw were Temur Rhinos, which ran that Lorien Revealed card. We had Amulet Titan. We had Tron. And then, of course, Jake Beardsley was the only Rakdos Evoke player to make it into the top 8. Now, we did get to see that the One Ring was the most played card of the weekend, which is really cool to see, just how powerful of a card it is. But there was 450 copies across all the decks for the entire weekend. So most people were running a playset, as you might expect in very particular decks. Second most popular card, Orcish Bowmasters, with 413 copies. So really, really cool to see just how much of an impact Lord of the Rings set has had. And I know a lot of people were expecting that. There was a lot of talk about Orcish Bowmasters when it first was spoiled, and just how powerful it is, because it's a trigger, both an enter the battlefield trigger, as well as when your opponent draws a second card, right? You're going to deal a damage, you're going to make an orc. It's got that double power, double combo that it just kind of keeps going and stuff like that. So let's talk about the Rakdos Evoke deck, because Jake played phenomenally well with the deck, and a lot of the like primers and discussions of the deck leading up to it was, oh, Rakdos Evoke, it's kind of like a more, mid-rangey Rakdos-y deck. It can grind it out. It runs Thoughtseize, it's kind of what you can expect from it. But seeing it in action and being piloted by Jake showed that it's not that traditional, mid-range deck that we were used to. It's not like a Jund, right? Which when you think of like the tried and true mid-range deck, Jund is right there. Like, I'm going to play this attrition, this disruptive cards, and just kind of grind you out and really capitalize on that mid-game. Where this had like these very specific lines and pivot points that it can go. And one thing is like, Jake was running some different cards than some of the other players were, opting for like Fable the Mirror Breaker, compared to a lot of people that were, rocking out different options for their stuff, right? So Fable the Mirror Breaker is a great card. It's been in basically every Pro Tour since it's been out, but Fable the Mirror Breaker is great. So that was like one slight adjustment, I think, because some people ran like less than 4 copies. I want to say I'd have to look at all the deck lists, but powerful enchantment. But the real power of the deck is like, I'm gonna evoke out a Fury, and then bring it back from the graveyard and really have a clock like immediately on turn 1, turn 2. You're getting out there and making something happen. They can do that from those instances that they got like Undying Malice or Feigned Death. Both of these, so you have like 6 copies, between both of them, right? 3 and 3, more or less. It works the best that way, so you're not stacked up with like 4 and 2 or slight variations. But the whole goal of it is to evoke out one of these creatures, cheat it into play, right? Enters the battlefield, does its effect. In Fury's case, we don't really care about its effect most of the time when you're playing it on turn 1. We really care about it entering the battlefield, dying, and then having your Undying Malice or Feigned Death make sure that creature is returned to the battlefield, and usually it's going to be tapped under your opponent's control with an extra +1 counter on it. So then it becomes a 4/4, and with Fury being a double strike, right? You're swinging for 8 damage a turn. Like the clock goes so quick before you kind of eliminate your opponent. Same thing with Grief, same plan. Like if you don't have a Fury, you're going to do the same thing with Grief, or get like double triggers so you get to strip away 2 cards. Very, very powerful. Great way to do it. But one thing that I really loved watching, and Jake specifically was playing against Christian Calcutta, and sequence things, because he was playing, right, this Rakdos Evoke deck. I've got the game plan. I can go really fast, or I can grind it out. He utilized his sequencing of holding a Thoughtseize to wait until he had his Dothy Voidwalker out so he could be able to really get maximum value. Where some players, if you didn't have as many reps or you're new to the deck, you might go, no, Thoughtseize is one of those first couple turns. I strip away stuff. I get the information. I know how to respond and deal with it. But having that Dothy Voidwalker is really kind of a linchpin to the deck that you wouldn't expect it, especially in the Tron matchup. Because if a card would be put into your opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it. Instead, you can sacrifice Dothy Voidwalker to be able to cast one of those cards without paying its mana cost. Now, one of the ways to help get you stuff into the graveyard is through those Thoughtseize effects. So, really great. We got to see Dothy Voidwalker steal an Ulamog. And there was a great little clip of Christian Calcutta like flinging it across the table to Jake, going, hey, here's what you're taking. The rest of the cards in my hand don't matter. You want this. Here you go. Fling it across, right? It's showing the energy, the emotions going on, and they're joking around about it. Like it was all in good fun. So there's these really powerful lines that you can do against a Tron, which is a very powerful, consistent deck, and why it was featured in the top 8 and made it second place there in the whole Pro Tour is because of its power level of being able to cast things like Ulamog and Ugin and things like that. So Dothy Voidwalker doing great in that regard. So the deck itself is just like the best red and black cards in there. It also has the normal removal spells that you expect, Terminate, Fatal Pushes, things like that. But it's one of those decks that looks straightforward and easy enough on paper, but it is one of those like I need to understand the lines. It's, it becomes infinitely more complicated by sideboarding and specific matchups and knowing what to bring in, what not to bring in, and where to kind of pivot your game plan. But like it has that ability to pivot between I'm a mid-range deck, right? I've got Sheldred in the sideboard. I've got these kind of Thoughtseize main board. I got Blood Moons. Or you can just be that kind of aggro. I'm playing Fury. I'm playing Grief, and I'm just swinging and turning things sideways and really getting a clock on you. So like Rakdos Evoke is not going anywhere anytime soon. It's got the Orcish Bowmaster for just like a little bit of, death by 1,000 cuts, extra little splash damage in there. So it is very, very, very powerful. So if you're going to be going to a Modern tournament anytime soon, be prepared to face against this deck. And if you don't have stuff prepared in your sideboard to deal with it, then you're going to be in a lot of trouble. I am going to expect to see a lot more Chalice of the Void start to be used from players because, if you're able to get a Chalice down early enough, especially like it's hard if you're running like Tron and stuff like that, it becomes so much easier. But like a Chalice on 2 definitely helps. A Chalice on 1, you shut off the reanimation spells of Feign Death, Undying. You shut off Ragavan, but that's hard, right? To be playing that kind of game where Dauthi Voidwalker, Orcish Bowmaster. There's a lot of great 2-drops, so it's a very low to the ground deck to be fighting against. Temur Rhinos is kind of the other deck that played very well that we'll be talking about. We're also going to be talking, of course, about Tron list, Amulet Titan, things like that. But let's get into, of course, our Tron list, Christian Calcutta's list, because, he got second place. So let's kind of highlight and go over his list compared to other people. Because there was slight variations on the number of the Chromatic Stars and Chromatic Spheres, mainly because of so many players running Dauthi Voidwalkers and things like that, where Christian Calcutta played almost the more traditional style, right? I'm running Ulamog, I'm running Wormcoils, I'm running Ugin, I'm running Karn Liberated, I'm running Karn the Great Creator. Karn Liberated has since been shaved off a lot on a lot of decks. Now you're seeing like a 1 of, 2 of here and there. And his list was running 2 of. Back in the day, old school Tron was running 4 of. But things have since pivoted to now it becomes almost like an artifact toolbox with a lot of mana behind it, which is really, really cool to see. You rely on Karn the Great Creator to be able to pull artifacts from your sideboard and utilize them throughout your game. So even in the sideboard stuff, there are going to be cards that you're going to want to bring in, but at the same time you go, well, I don't have to disrupt too much of my game plan and rely on Karn to just pull the silver bullets that I need, because you're running so many 1-ofs in your sideboard that it becomes great. And so it's like you have to plan and get those lines down of, I can mulligan very aggressively with the deck because your goal is to try to get Tron and a payoff card as quickly as possible. You could have Tron available very quickly where you're like, oh, I've got stars and spheres and maps and 2 of my Tron lands and Sylvan Scrying and things like that. But if you don't have a payoff card or a way to find one, that hand becomes less powerful, right? So things like Ancient Stirrings are going to be really useful to help find those, or aggressively mulliganing. One addition to the deck that is pushing it and allowing it to be so much stronger too is of course the One Ring, right? You're seeing 3 copies main board, 1 sideboard, and that's going to be probably consistent for the longest time with the deck, because Karn the Great Creator being able to pull from the sideboard, grab a One Ring as needed. You only need 4 mana, so if you're hurting and you're struggling to be able to get the amount of mana that you need, like you're missing your search effects, or you're being disrupted, stuff is happening, and you haven't gotten Tron online yet, on turn 4, it buys you a turn to maybe be able to assemble Tron on the following turn. Right, the One Ring, of course, indestructible, enters the battlefield. Whenever you've cast it, of course, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. So it's just saying, hey, you can't attack and deal damage to me. Then, of course, it has that tap ability where you can start taking damage and drawing cards. It is legendary, so you can be able to kind of cycle through and play a bunch more. So it's really, really strong, and it's not going anywhere, and we're going to see a lot more decks utilizing it if they can, right? And we're seeing like the big ramp decks are running it. Even some of the powerful decks that are not just running those, like even artifact decks, are going to start utilizing this card as well. So One Ring isn't going anywhere, but that's a big part of it. It's going to be relying on the One Ring. It's going to be relying on Oblivion Stone, these delay tactics to really get to our payout cards, Ulamog, Ugin, right? These game-winning effects. So very powerful deck, not going anywhere again. Expect to get your reps in against Tron because it's going to be one of those that's going to be a bit of a powerhouse over, the next set of meta that we're seeing. Like, it's always been a strong deck, but it's, one of the ones that is just now really seeing a big resurgence and revitalization with the access to the One Ring, which is cool to see. Like, a deck that has kind of been stagnant for a long time and hasn't really gotten new tools to play with other than a few sideboard stuff. It's great to see that happening. Now, the other kind of big ramp deck in the top 8, besides the mono green Tron that we talked about, because there was, of course, a couple copies of Tron in there, was our Amulet Titan list. Now, Amulet Titan, similar in some regards to Tron in the sense that it's a land-focused deck, big mana deck. That's, what it cares about. But it's got that ability to use the Sunhome Fortress Legion, Slayer Stronghold to really just kind of double strike in and like essentially kill somebody. You're swinging in here with Primeval Titan most of the time. 6 power becomes 8 power. That's 16 double strike essentially. Most of the time someone's fetched, they've shocked, they're at 16 life, so you are pretty much one-shotting somebody with it. It's another deck that runs a very mix of cards, similar to Tron in that it has a lot of silver bullet style effects, but instead of it being artifacts, it's going to be more of lands in this regard here. So it's going to be running effects that will allow you to utilize your lands a little bit. It's got all those bounce lands. It's running Boseiju, Otawaro, Valakut. We talked about Sunhome, Slayer Stronghold, Teleria West to kind of help tutor for a Pact, Microsynth Gardens, right? It's got all these great different lands. And, of course, Urza Saga, because our goal is to get an Amulet of Vigor because that really turns the deck online. Amulet of Vigor, 1-cost artifact. Whenever a permanent enters the battlefield, tap under your control, untap it. So all those bounce lands, the Boros Garrison, the Selesnya Sanctuaries, these 2-mana lands that enter tapped and bounce something. Well, now guess what? We are now having them enter untapped and speeding up our game plan. So our goal is to play as many lands as possible. Azusa, a Boral Grazer, Dryad of Elysian Grove, right? These ways so we can ramp up into Primeval Titan. Some lists are also running Cultivator Colossus, which, power toughness equal number of lands you control, and you get to tutor and put a land onto the battlefield. Draw a card, repeat this process. So, sorry, it doesn't get to tutor, but Primeval Titan's the tutor one. Cultivate just puts it from your hand on the battlefield and you keep going. But it's another deck that relies on the new edition of the One Ring because, hey, we're playing a bunch of lands. Why would we not want to draw cards and help speed up our game plan and protect us while we're ramping and doing that play? So another very, very powerful deck. Lots of silver bullets sitting in the sideboard there. Amulet Titan's always been good. It used to be back in the day one of the best decks with Summer Bloom, hence why it got banned the same time that Splinter Twin got banned, just because of how good it is. But it's still strong enough to make it into the top 8. The other, of course, deck that we're going to be talking about is our Temur Rhino list. Now, if you guys are familiar with this, the deck's been around for quite a bit now. We've got Shardless Agent, as well as Violent Outbursts are our kind of cascade effects, and we're cascading into our one suspend card known as Crashing Footfalls, which creates 2 4/4 Rhino creature tokens with trample. Gets a clock going right away. I mean, you're casting this, of course, turn 3. Shardless Agent is 3 mana. And of course, Violent Outburst is also 3 mana. Violent Outburst is instant speed, so you can do that on your opponent's turn. Untap, swing for 8, trample damage. Very powerful clock that gets things going right away. Also, of course, just runs, other powerful spells in here that you can be able to utilize. Fire and Ice is in here. Dismember, it's got counterspell, Force Negation, Mystical Dispute to kind of protect and back up your game plan. Now, Lorien Revealed is in here, so you can kind of speed up and get your lands going. You can get around 21 lands or so in the deck, and just sort of, hey, I'll be able to utilize this land cycling. And worst case, as I'm sitting here, I've got my Rhinos online. If I'm doing nothing else, I could be able to draw 3 cards off this, or pitch it with the use of Subtlety and get Subtlety out. So it's, a very straightforward game plan. It does also utilize some additional evoke creatures, of course, because it is Temur. So blue, red, and green, you get access to things like Fury. You get access to things like Endurance. So it is really good. Of course, another Blood Moon based deck in that regard, if you can run Blood Moon in the sideboard, because you know what, it's not that hard for us to be able to make 3 mana, right? We can easily have a single island, a single forest, and then there's our mountain we got to cast Shardless Agent and go and get the Rhinos online. This deck, of course, has been another one that has been very, very strong in the modern meta for quite some time. Did get that new tool, of course, of the Lorien Revealed, but is not utilizing the other 2 most powerful and most played cards right now in modern, which, the One Ring and Orcish Bowmaster. So none of those in there. But it does have that ability to kind of dodge Orcish Bowmasters, more or less. We don't really care if you're shooting our Shardless Agent down because we're making 4/4 Rhinos. Right? It's also running Questing Beast in there and Murktide Reagent most of the time. So some variation in numbers for that regard. But again, your goal is to get out early. Turn 3, having 2 4/4 Rhinos is very, very scary to fight against. That's the kind of name of the game with that deck, is get the clock online, get going as fast as you can. Pro Tours often, have players repping and doing the things, and they're going, okay, what deck is going to do the best against X, Y, and Z? What's going to give me the best chance against these decks, right? Because there were other decks and players, of course, used, right? Burns, one of those, Yawgmoth, Omnath. There's other decks that are, of course, still in the meta that people are utilizing. But a lot of times, the ones that, of course, made it to the top 8 were the ones that were doing the best. Like Living End, had been dominating the meta for quite a while. But it's still, even then, it's like, all right, well, now I have access to, the One Ring. I have access to other type effects like Dothy Voidwalker that just laughs at your cycling effects. Especially if you get a Dothy out early enough against a Living End player, they just go, well, I now have no way to do anything, because every time I'm paying 1 discarding, all right, to put this in the graveyard, it's getting exiled by Dothy Voidwalker. So that basically shuts down your game plan altogether there. I expect the meta to continue to stay this way. If you're in your local shop, you might be seeing a slightly different meta than, of course, the big tournament scenes, and that's just normal, as expected. But if you plan to start traveling and going to bigger events, you will have to be able to see that. So, let's talk a little bit about that whole tournament traveling and tournament playing again. Being able to play at the highest level or even just play at a tournament level, you're going to, get nerves. I don't know any player that plays in a tournament that the first time they played, they feel fine, unless they don't really care, right? If they don't really care, they're just like, I'm just here to have fun, play. that's fine. That makes sense. But if you're actually, going and trying to win, it's different, right? There's the stress. You might make mistakes, and the more reps you can put in, the better you're going to be. You're going to notice specific lines easier. And a lot of the pros, of course, have time to practice and test and get those lines down. I always advocate for play the deck that you know the best, that you have the most reps with, even if it is not the best deck. There's one thing to be said about, I or a player that doesn't play Rakdos mid-range picked up the deck. Yes, I could do well because the deck is so strong, but I would make mistakes in sequencing or prioritize certain cards over the others, especially sideboarding. I would have a real hard time learning what is the priority in certain matchups, where if I was playing, Infect, or if I was playing Yawgmoth, or if I was playing Tron, or if I was playing, the Selesnya Life Gain or Devoted Druid combo, like these specific decks that I have more reps with and more practice with, even Death Shadow, right? These decks that I'm like, okay, I know the lines better. I will perform better than picking up a brand new deck that I've never played before. So reps matter when you're playing, and I feel like some of you players that maybe only play Commander have had that similar experience, where you've picked up your deck and you start to see, like, if you play your deck multiple times, right? I know some people that have so many decks that are just like, I play this like deck once every 6 months or something like that, and then I'll just pick a different deck. Or when you pick up that deck every 6 months, yes, you'll see similar lines, but it's different when you're going, oh, I have 3 decks that I rotate between, and I know the lines in and out. If I see these specific cards, I know they synergize really well with these other cards, that I will maybe hold this card longer in my hand because I know that it does really well with these other cards that are in my deck. Where, you might know that instinctively going into it because you built the deck, but just like getting the reps in, you see these lines, you see these synergies a lot more, and it really becomes kind of that almost muscle memory in your brain of what to expect in there. I don't know. I'm getting very excited to be playing Modern again, going out, starting to play a little bit more, but still just kind of rocking Infect. I'm thinking of going to start rocking out some Hammer Time for a little bit, because that's it's a nice fun deck that also has the ability to infect people, and it doesn't rely on me needing the One Ring or Orcish Bowmasters. Basically, I was looking through a lot of my Modern collection today, and it goes, okay, sweet. I have most of the things for this deck. I have most of the things for this deck. Like Tron was one of those where I go, sweet, I have everything except for 4 copies of the One Ring. Well, I guess I could just, put something else in place, but the One Ring will just make this deck so much better, right? Oh, I have Yawgmoth, but I don't have any Orcish Bowmasters right now. I have 1 Orcish Bowmaster, and it's in one of my Commander decks. I need 4 of them. I don't really want to spend, $180, $200 on 4 of these right now. So it's like, what deck am I gonna start playing where I go, oh, okay, I'll start grinding this out. And it might be over the next couple 6 months, a year, we'll do a check-in and see how much more decks that I have. Living End is the other one where it's like I had a lot of the old school stuff for Living End. I do not currently have 4 copies of Grief. All right, Grief is another one that's you're like paying $140, $150 for 4 copies of that. It's great, you run 4 of in Living End. It's great, you run 4 of in the Rakdos Scam, Rakdos Evoke deck. So it's like, do I really want to commit that? Where I have I basically have everything else for this deck, minus that, with the exception of some of the sideboard stuff. Right, I don't have. I have 1 copy of Subtlety. I have 1 copy of Endurance. I have 1 copy of Grief. I have 1 copy of Fury, and all of those copies are currently sitting in my cube. And I'm like, what do I need all these copies for? I'm not, I'm building cubes. I'm playing Commander. I don't need 4 copies of it. And now I'm kind of being like, maybe I should have gotten these copies earlier. But that's that hindsight's and all that. But I don't think I'm gonna if I made the choice to pick up cards, Grief is not gonna be one of those that I'm gonna pick up before I pick up Orcish Bowmasters or the One Ring. Partly because yes, I have most of the stuff for Living End. I have all the stuff for the old version of it, minus Grief. But it's Living End, Rakdos. Those aren't the decks that I'm interested in playing. But I don't know. You guys let me know. What are the decks that you guys are currently playing in Modern? Have you been following Modern? Have you seen the Lord of the Rings development of things? I'm very excited to see what happens in the Modern meta. And we're going to have a ban and restricted announcement coming out next week. Some people are speculating, maybe they'll do something to address the One Ring or address Orcish Bowmasters I'm fine with. I would rather see cards be unbanned. I want to see Birthing Pod unbanned. There's Punishing Fires is perfectly fine in the meta right now. As much as I would love to see, Splinter Twin, I don't think they'll unban it. Even though, again, in today's meta, with cards free counter spells that we have access to, people are gonna be fine, right? You have access to what is it? Force of Negation, right? If it's not your turn, exile a blue card from your hand rather than pay its cost. Counter target non-creature spell. The spell is countered this way. Exile instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. Force of Negation was not around back in the days of old Splinter Twin, and so on your opponent's turn, hey, I'm gonna just use Force of Negation, chip this blue card, and you lose your Splinter Twin. Now you just have a 1/4 or a 2/1. Okay, well, I have 2 4/4 Rhinos coming at you. My clock is going to be faster than your, turn your 2 guys sideways. So I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to see. I really just want more unbanning, especially since we're at 1 ban, 1 unban, and there's a ban announcement basically once a year now. So I'd love to see some unbannings. Modern Horizons really changed the landscape, and now we're seeing Lord of the Rings, input some really powerful cards into Modern. I think we're due for some unbannings. But that's kind of our Pro Tour talk. We broke down some decks. Did a little bit of a kind of Modern meta breakdown in this just podcast form, just for all of you listeners out there, because we have been putting some stuff up on YouTube. We are doing some stuff Instagram, TikTok, Shorts as well. All that stuff, of course, is on the same place, Name Man's Nerd Corner, so you guys can be able to check that out. Spread the word if you like the content. Let other people know to listen to the podcast. And, thanks for tuning in and watching, guys. That's going to be the main stuff for today. Oh, before we go, of course, we got to talk about what are we watching, what are we doing, what's going on, what are we playing, all those fun things. There are a couple of shows that are, on the docket, ready to dive into and watch. We have been watching Secret Invasion. I know the finale already aired at the time of recording, but we haven't watched it yet. It's fine. If we did a ranking system, it's a little bit of the spy aspect and kind of, all right, it's telling more of the Fury story. Cool. Dig it. I'm not blown away. It's no Moon Knight. It's no Loki, right? There's definitely shows that are better in the Marvel show scene, but it's still a good show. There hasn't been a Marvel show that I thought has been bad, though. I know there's a lot of people that have watched certain ones and go, this is bad, I really don't like. But it's Marvel show. I don't know. I get to watch superhero stuff, and I don't know. I love it. I love it. I'm a big nerd. What can I say? So I'm watching that. The Twisted Metal show just came out too. Haven't started it. It's on the list. That's going to be another one that I'm going to start and watch. Love Twisted Metal back in the day. We played a lot of that on the PlayStation because that was our console of choice. PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, all the way up, even to PlayStation 3 we had. So we played a lot of Twisted Metal as kids growing up. So I'm really excited to see how good they do with this. Yeah. And, of course, Bleach is back. 1,000-Year Blood Wars going on. We're really picking things up. It's getting good. So I don't know. There's lots of good stuff to watch right now if you're a nerd. So make sure you guys are checking things out with that regard. So that's the stuff we're watching right now. But I hope you guys have been enjoying it. Let me know what you guys are watching. Let me know what you're playing. I want to hear from you guys. But that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening, guys. And I'll see you guys next game.